But Halloween was always fun until the incident. I start hearing a bunch of people yelling, "Call 911!" Lorenzo passed away in my arms. Lorenzo was only 14 years old. Well, it was exactly 1 year later that something very, very strange began happening to me after that. But no matter where I was, no matter what I was doing, it didn't matter. It just kept on happening. And there was this pause. And then he began saying through his thick Italian accent something that happened that night that only he and Lorenzo knew.
There is an unwritten code in Brooklyn. You don't tell anyone else's stories, and you don't talk about anyone else's business. Every story I tell is mine. Locations, names, and specific details have all been changed to honor that code. This is Brooklyn Files, the real stories.
Back when I was growing up in Brooklyn, Halloween was always a really fun experience. We would put on the Halloween costumes and go trick-or-treating like every other kid. My mom would buy us these costumes that came in what looked like a pie box, as I always like to call it. The box had a clear plastic window on it on the top. It looked like the box that a pie comes in. Inside was a thin plastic mask that was held on your face with a rubber band. It had holes for the eyes. It was really uncomfortable. It also came with this plastic smock that went over your clothing. It looked ridiculous. And it was usually cold in October in Brooklyn, so you went trick-or-treating with your winter coat on and the costume over it. And the costumes were usually superheroes or cartoon characters. I mean, we loved dressing up like that. And the decorations weren't the elaborate and morbid ones that you see today. It was much different. Back in the day, they were more simplistic, a little more innocent, if you will. It was usually a pumpkin or a black cat or something like that. And after we went trick-or-treating, my mom would always have to comb through our candy. It was this hard and fast rule. Like, you were not allowed to eat the Halloween candy before my mom did her official inspection. And my mom would first have to make sure there was nothing suspicious or weird about the wrapping before we could eat the candy. There was always rumors that people would tamper with the candy, or worse yet, put razor blades in the apples. I remember that was a common legend that all the kids would repeat around Halloween. So of course you would never eat the fruit. That was off limits if somebody gave that to you when you were trick-or-treating. And I remember some of the old people would give us a popcorn ball. It was this big ball made of popcorn. It was weird, it was hard. And I'm not sure who the heck would eat it, but I never did. That or a bag of pennies. That was the absolute worst thing to get when you were trick-or-treating. Nobody wanted pennies. But Halloween was always fun. It was always a pleasant experience when I was growing up in Brooklyn, of course, until the incident. That forever changed the way I felt about Halloween going forward. It was 1984. I just turned 15 years old. One of my best friends was Rohan. He was from India. Both of his parents were doctors. His parents were really cool. They were nice to me. Rohan's parents would go on a lot of vacations, and when they did, they would leave Rohan home alone most of the time. Rohan was a year older than me, so he was 16. He was a responsible kid, or at least that's what his parents thought. But whenever Rohan's parents would go away, he would throw some kind of a party. He would first plan the party, then word would get around pretty quickly in the neighborhood that Rohan's parents were leaving town and that there would be this big party. So it started to become a thing of legend. The kids in the neighborhood would buzz about it for a couple of weeks whenever Rohan would put out the word that his parents were going away on vacation. Everybody from the neighborhood would come to these parties. By the second or third party, they began getting so legendary that even kids from other neighborhoods would start showing up, and you could find anywhere from 100 to 120 kids in Rohan's house on a Saturday night when he threw one of these legendary parties. They were no joke. Well, Halloween that year was on a Wednesday, so the weekend before, it was the 27th of October, a Saturday. Rohan's parents were going to be away up in Cape Cod or something like that for the weekend, And as usual, as Rohan's best friend, I would help him organize the party. We would gather up the money from other friends, we would sort of collect it, and then we'd start buying supplies and things like that. And I won't incriminate us, so I'm not gonna say there was alcohol at these parties, but if you were thirsty, there was plenty to drink. Let's just put it that way. And don't forget, this was Halloween, so we had to put up the decorations beforehand. In fact, the entire week before the party, we were rigging things around Rohan's house, making it feel like a haunted house. We hung spider webs, skeletons, the whole 9 yards, tombstones, even a smoke machine. We went all out. The night of the party comes around, and it's around 8 o'clock, and the house is filling up with all of the neighborhood kids. All of our friends begin showing up. Most of them, they were dressed up in their costumes. I also had this one good friend. His name was Lorenzo. Lorenzo was a really good kid. He and I hung out a lot. He was a little younger than us. He was 14. His parents were from Italy, so they both spoke with like an Italian accent. Not only was Lorenzo a little younger than us, he was also a little shorter. He was a small guy, so I always felt this sense that I had to look out for him, sort of like a big brother to him. And Lorenzo came to the party that night with a Dracula costume, but he didn't have any makeup on his face when he arrived. It was like he had this incomplete costume. When Lorenzo saw all the other kids in costume wearing some kind of facial makeup, I think that's when he decided that he didn't want to feel left out and have this half of a costume. So he asked Rohan if there was any extra costume makeup to put on his face. Rohan pointed to the kitchen table where there was a couple of packages of Halloween makeup, and he said something like, "Help yourself." So Lorenzo grabbed one of those makeup kits, and then he starts walking towards the bathroom with it. My guess is that he was going to look in the mirror so he could put on his Dracula makeup, not mess it up. Several minutes pass, and we're just hanging out, having a good time at the party, talking to one another, and suddenly I hear a scream. I start hearing a bunch of people yelling, "Call 911! Call 911!" As I'm looking around, I can see a crowd forming outside of the bathroom, and I push through the group of people, and I could see Lorenzo holding his throat, and his face is starting to puff up. He was sort of convulsing. He didn't look good. He was losing color in his face. His eyes were even rolling back in his head. It was very, very scary. It just makes me nervous talking about it, and my heart starts racing just thinking about it, and it brings back some terrible, terrible memories. A couple of my friends, they run into the kitchen, and one of them grabs the phone, and they start dialing 911. We're trying to get Lorenzo help as urgently as we could, but it was obvious he was fading fast. We're at a Halloween party at my friend Rohan's house. My other friend Lorenzo is in the bathroom, and he's fading fast, like laying on the floor. His eyes are rolling back in his head. He's losing consciousness. What we ended up finding out is that he was putting on his Halloween makeup, and we didn't know at the time what was happening, but apparently Lorenzo was allergic to the Halloween makeup, and he was going into anaphylactic shock. The poor kid was just trying to put some white makeup on his face to make himself look like Dracula, and had no idea that he was about to make a deadly mistake. Don't forget, this was 1984, before there were many hypoallergenic options for Halloween makeups like they have now. Sadly, the ambulance arrived a few minutes too late. Lorenzo passed away in my arms, and I'd been holding him, trying to revive him, but completely defenseless in being able to help him. This was well before the days of EpiPens, so we had no chance to help him. He went into shock and then cardiac arrest, and the poor kid passed away right there on the bathroom floor as I held him. We were all devastated. Lorenzo was only 14 years old. Everyone at the party started crying, and some people started leaving, but everybody was completely in shock. And I'll never forget seeing his poor father's face as he came to the door when the emergency vehicles were outside Rohan's house. Someone had called Lorenzo's dad, told him to get there quickly, but he didn't arrive soon enough. The poor man was broken. He was bawling, speaking some indiscernible words, through his heavy Italian accent, that heartbreaking sound and image will stay with me for the rest of my life. Well, it was exactly 1 year later that something very, very strange began happening to me after that, every Halloween. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but after the second year and the third year and so on, I started to realize that it was not my imagination. It was also not a coincidence, and this was most definitely happening to me. On the very first anniversary of Lorenzo's death, I'd gotten on the city bus. It was Halloween day. I was coming home from my job, and there was a baseball card sitting on the only available seat on the bus. So I just picked up the baseball card and I sat down, and I thought nothing of it. But 1 year after that, on Halloween day, I was 17 years old and delivering groceries, and I found another baseball card, this time in the stairwell of one of the buildings that I was delivering in. And every year from that point forward, there was some form or another, some kind of baseball card imagery that I would come across on Halloween day, whether it was an actual baseball card or a commercial on TV or a baseball card package wrapper or whatever. But it was always something involving baseball cards. In fact, this went on through my 30s and even early 40s. 1 year on Halloween, I was around 30 years old. I'm going out to dinner and I couldn't find parking on the street of the restaurant, so I had to drive to the next block, and there was a parking spot right in front of a sports memorabilia shop. And right there, as I'm walking around the car to feed the meter, I see this baseball card wrapper sitting on the ground outside the store. Every single year, year after year, never any other day either, just Halloween day or the day before or after, just, in that time frame. But no matter where I was, no matter what I was doing, it didn't matter. It just kept on happening. 1 year, I'm at a Halloween party, and there's this magician, and the magician does a card trick where one of the cards, rises from the deck, and the card was a baseball card. And then fast forward to when I was 40 years old, and I'm out trick-or-treating with my 2 young daughters in Pennsylvania, and we're going door to door in our new neighborhood. It was Halloween day. My kids are 7 and 5 at this point, and we just moved to Pennsylvania that year. And I remember thinking, there's no way this omen is gonna follow me all the way here. And just a few doors down, we ring the doorbell, and some guy opens the door. He's dressed like Dracula, and he even has the white makeup on his face, like Lorenzo did that day. And he's in full costume, dressed up, handing out candy and stuff. And he reaches into a bucket and he pulls out 2 packs of baseball cards, and then he drops them into my kids' trick-or-treat bags. The whole thing just happened in slow motion. I just couldn't believe what I had just seen. The baseball card phenomenon had even followed me there to Pennsylvania. So I continued to be perplexed. It really bothered me for so many years. I had no idea what was going on. Was I going crazy? Was there something happening from the other side that I was unaware of? A few months after that, I made up my mind that I was going to find some of the answers to those questions. I just had to know what was going on. I just had to get to the bottom of this once and for all. And I just couldn't ignore the fact that all these encounters began the year immediately following Lorenzo's passing. I always felt like this was somehow connected to Lorenzo and that one night at the party just a few days before Halloween in 1984. I really felt like I was going on a far limb by reaching out to Lorenzo's dad, but I just felt like there was some kind of a connection that perhaps his father can shed some light on. Well, it took me a few weeks to muster up the nerve to reach out to his dad. I sort of knew how to find him because over the years, Lorenzo's family members would always come up on my social media as people you may know, namely Lorenzo's sister. One day I decided to follow that path and I tried to connect with his sister. A few days later, I was connected with her. And then I explained, of course, to her that I was the boy that was with her brother that one tragic night at the party. And I didn't go into detail or explain to her the whole situation with the baseball cards. I just asked her if there was a way that I could reach out to her dad. And I just simply explained that I wanted to reconnect with him after all these years and just sort of pay my respects in that sense, which was completely true. I mean, I really did want that too. And Lorenzo's sister gave me her dad's phone number. Just having her dad's number made me nervous too in itself. Even after having it, I still waited a couple of weeks I wasn't sure how to ask Lorenzo's dad how this odd situation could somehow tie in with Lorenzo's passing, if at all, but I at least wanted his dad's take on it. So one Saturday afternoon, I decided, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna make this phone call. After a few rings, his dad picks up. It was weird hearing his voice after all these years, but it sounded the same as I remembered it, but just more frail and older, but still with that same heavy accent that I remembered. And then I slowly and calmly explained to Lorenzo's dad who I was. I said, "This is Jay. I'm not sure if you remember me, but I'm the boy that was with your son the night he passed away." And then he suddenly got quiet. There was this pause. And then he emphatically said, "Jay, I always wondered what happened to you," as if to sound happy to hear from me. And I was very surprised by that reaction. I didn't expect to get that. We then reminisced a bit about the old days and how I would play with his son. We also recalled that terrible night. We both got a bit teary-eyed too, as we remembered that horrible series of events. Then I cautiously began to ask Lorenzo's dad if he knew of any reason why I would start seeing baseball cards every year on Halloween. And I sort of started explaining the situation, but before I could even explain the whole thing to him, he starts letting out these loud gasps, as if he knew something I didn't know. I'm on the phone with Lorenzo's dad, and I start addressing the baseball card situation with him, hoping that he could shed some light on what's been happening to me all these years. And I barely get through the sentence, and he lets out this gasp of exasperation, as if he knew something monumental about the situation and the baseball cards. As if this was something he'd been holding on to for years, almost like he'd been waiting to tell me this, and then I just waited to hear him speak. And there was this pause. And then he began saying through his thick Italian accent something that happened that night that only he and Lorenzo knew. He began to tell me when he was driving Lorenzo to the party that night that he passed away, Lorenzo asked his dad if it'd be okay to give me, one of his closest friends, his extra Darryl Strawberry rookie card from 1984. That card was issued 6 months prior in April of 1984. Lorenzo apparently got 2 copies of that rookie card, and Lorenzo knew that I was a big Darryl Strawberry fan, and so he wanted me to have that extra card. His dad said it was totally fine, and he was planning on giving it to me at the party, and then just forgot to give it to me. His dad said that after he had passed away, and when his dad met the ambulance at the emergency room, the doctors had given him his son's clothing with the costume, and when his dad checked one of the pockets, he found the card still in there, and that's how his dad knew that he never gave the card to me. Lorenzo's dad always wondered what had happened to me after that, and he always thought that he would have liked to reach out to me to give me that card, but he just never did it. He didn't know how to reach me. And he just held on to that extra card all those years. He always wished that I had gotten that card and knew that would have been Lorenzo's wish. Everything made sense after that day. I mean, not everyone believes in the supernatural and the ability to speak to somebody beyond the grave, but I truly believe that Lorenzo was trying to get that message to me. I believe that he was sending me a signal, one that I truly could not translate on my own. But eventually in time I did, with the help of his dad. I was incredibly touched when his father said that he still wanted me to have that 1984 Darryl Strawberry rookie card. A couple of weeks later, it arrived to my home in the mail, and I still have that card to this very day. And yes, the very year that I received that card, I stopped seeing those baseball card images on Halloween. It just stopped. It's as if Lorenzo finally got his wish, like he was satisfied with the outcome. I think about Lorenzo a lot and I miss him. He was such a good friend, a good kid. Wherever you are, Lorenzo, thank you for your friendship. And thank you for the baseball card.